recently, right-wing Republican governor from Florida, Ron DeSantis, his administration made an announcement that they would be blocking an advanced placement African American studies course. In a letter to the College Board dated January 12th, the Florida Department of Education said the course is, quote, inexplicably contrary to Florida law and significantly lacks educational value, end quote. They also said that they would be willing to reopen the discussion if the College Board comes back to the table with a, quote, lawful, historically accurate content. The DeSantis administration didn't bother to say what they found objectionable, but Brian Griffin, one of his henchmen, or I should say spokesman, told CNN that the course, quote, leaves large ambiguous gaps that can be filled with additional ideological material, which we will not allow. So what is the ideology that they won't allow? And what makes this kind of curriculum unlawful of all things? I want to bring in my panel to discuss this. There are a crew of educational experts. I have Dr. Bettina Love. She's an award-winning author and professor at Teachers College, Columbia University. We also have Dr. Chris Emdin, the Robert A. Naslund Endowed Chair in Curriculum Theory, and he's a professor of education at the University of Southern California. And we have Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings, Philly's finest, former Kellner Family Distinguished Professor of Urban Education at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Thank y'all for joining me. I'm going to start with you, Dr. Ladson-Billings. What's going on here in Florida? They blocking courses now? I didn't even think a governor would care to be blocking a Black Studies course.
Well, Mark, one of the things that makes me in some ways unique to talk about is I'm sitting in Florida right now. So I have a bird's eye view of this. Apparently, the course is in violation of the so-called Stop Woke Act. What is also happening at the same time that they block this course, all of the Florida two-year colleges have signed a document saying they will not teach divisive concepts, that they will not endorse any critical race theory in any courses. So, and the third thing that's happening is that the four-year schools, University of Florida, Florida State, and other state schools have had to turn in their, quote, diversity content information. So there is an all-out war, and I'll be very clear, it's on Blackness that is occurring in this state.
A war on Black. I'm glad you said that. And you said it violates the Stop Woke Act. I wanted y'all to know what this is, because this is some fascinating stuff here. In 2022, Ron DeSantis made a decision to put out a bill called Stop Woke. And, you know, we talk about what woke means and how they just took woke from Black folk and made it something else. But woke stands for a wrong to our kids and employees. They just found any reason to put woke in a bill. They didn't even need that. And the bill basically is also known as the Individual Freedom Act, and it prohibits any teachings in classrooms that members of one race, color, national origin, or sex are morally superior to others. A person by virtue of his or her race, color, national origin, or sex is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive, whether consciously or unconscious. So you can't say white folk are inherently racist or men are inherently sexist. They say that a person's moral character or status is either privileged or oppressed. So you can't talk about white privilege. You can't talk about any of that stuff. So we go on down the line. Now, Bettina, they didn't even tell us what was wrong with the class. They just said, it's ambiguous and there's some ideology going in. I mean, if that's the standard, I mean, it seems like we could ban anything.
Well, listen, Mark, thanks so much for having this conversation and thanks for having us on. I want to be very clear and add some context to this, because what we're experiencing and what we're understanding, it seems new, but it's not new. This is a part of an old, very old playbook. It is more funded. It is more sophisticated, it is more bold. But what they're doing is using the Southern strategy in education. And we've seen this done time and time again. So what they want to do is have a political wedge issue. They want to be politically divisive without ever talking about real issues. So here we are with a governor caring about what is happening in classrooms where we're not having conversations about immigration. We're not having conversations about homelessness. We're not having conversations around a living wage. We're having a conversation around what should be taught in schools right now around justice and democracy and equality and justice. And so this is what we have when we have politicians who don't want to talk about issues, but want to talk about actual being divisive and not really banning anything but liberty and justice and democracy and love and Black people. So when you ban democracy, you are banning Black people. We are democracy. So it's very clear about what's happening right now. This is divisive politics. And instead of talking about the hard issues that are impacting all of us, they want to bring it down, water it down, and have a divisive conversation around Black people. And so they've always used white resentment as a way.
I'm glad you said that. That's the word.
Wedge issues.
That's the word right there. Because I was going to, and I want to ask you this, Chris. I mean, because Bettina's making a really important point here, right? That this is a distraction from stuff they could be doing in Florida, like getting people to not get COVID, right? Or fixing the economy, or all these other things. But they know that this will divide people. Why does it work? Why is it that people get so outraged that they want to ban a Black studies curriculum? And there's a whole bunch of people, and it ain't Black people right now, who are very excited and proud of their governor because he stood up to the College Board, because he stood up to these crazies who want to make an African-American studies course that has, he said, no intellectual value. Why does this stir up something in people?
Well, the essence of it is this. If I can orchestrate a weapon of mass distraction, then I can blame you for doing something that I'm doing. So let's put this in perspective. Like, the argument was that the College Board's course was ambiguous and non-specific. As a consequence of that, we can interrogate deeply. But the Stop Woke Act is ambiguous and unspecific. So oftentimes, if you can accuse somebody of doing something, it distracts folks from identifying the fact that what you're doing is in itself the very nature of what you're describing. So that's the first thing. It's like, yo, don't look at me as I do what I'm saying you're doing. The other piece of this is that we have to keep in mind that this is also happening in a sort of post-Trump era where he's called forth these perceptions about white disgruntlement and Black empowerment being the cause of white folks recognizing the fact that they've enacted these practices on Black folks for a long time. So in many ways, we have to also understand, like, DeSantis is he playing chess a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, this is not just about what's going on in schools. It's about him signaling to those folks who want the sort of rise of white power again, to show that he's going to stand up in the face of folks who are literally arguing for their humanity. And then the last part of this is this. The argument that he makes about that particular course is really intriguing, right? He goes, we don't want to have this AP course because if we have this course, then some folks will feel as though they're empowered and some folks will feel disempowered. But keep it a buck with you, who's taking an AP African-American Studies course? Black kids.
Right. Just
so
Black
there's no
people.
instance
Right.
there.
Got a whole bunch of white kids in Tampa or Boca Raton saying, I need that AP.
I need that course real bad, right? So ain't nobody doing that. So this is essentially utilizing the course as a signal, number one, but two, erasing the opportunities for those young folks to hear about their truths. And then thirdly, orchestrating a weapon of mass distraction to show that he has the power to be able to stand up to people who are arguing for their rights.
Gloria, I'm worried for a couple reasons. Ron DeSantis, he ain't no doctor. He's running for president probably. And I don't want to tell y'all this, but I think he might win if things go the way I don't want them to go. Me personally, I'm not speaking for the network, speaking for me as Marc Lamont Hill. If he wins, this could become federal. I mean, what would it mean to live in a country where the president is waging war on us? In the same way that Donald Trump had the 1776 commission after the 1619 book came out, what would it mean to have a president who does this?
Think about the fact that last week, DeSantis added 4 new members to the Board of Trustees of Florida's new college. And new college signals and signifies all of the things we think of in progressive education. It's the state's smallest liberal arts college for people who don't want to do school the typical way. So they do without grades and they do a lot of writing and what have you. Of the 4 people that he named, one of them is Christopher Rufo.
My God.
And Rufo has declared, I'm coming there because we're changing the curriculum. We're getting away. So this is a long-term strategy. What I find really interesting is you go back and look at DeSantis' initial run for governor. He didn't have any of this rhetoric. That's not what he ran on.
Right.
So I think it is interesting that he is leveraging the gerrymandering in the state, the popularity of Donald Trump in this state, and just rewriting his own persona. So I'm not convinced that this is something that he is as committed to as it is that he's committed to winning. And we end up being the collateral damage.
That is absolutely true. I'm glad you mentioned Christopher Rufo, because he has single-handedly almost waged war on critical race theory, which is a part of our conversation that we're going to have after the break. Welcome back to The Griot. We're discussing race and education, and I want to talk now about critical race theory. Critical race theory is an intellectual movement that emerges out of law schools, that emerges out of a rich intellectual tradition that challenges our traditional understandings of race and racism. It presumes that racism is an intractable part of American life, that race is a social construct. There's a lot more to it that we can discuss, but states around the country aren't engaged in the idea of critical race theory. They don't really understand critical race theory, but you know what they are doing? They're banning critical race theory, even when they don't know what it is. As of 2021, 8 states have passed legislation that bans critical race theory discussions, with 20 additional states planning to introduce similar legislation. So the question is, is this a war on critical race theory? And if not, what is it really about if they don't really know what it is? I want to bring my panel back. They're going to answer that question. Bettina Love is an author, an award-winning author and a best-selling author, and professor at Teachers College, Columbia University. Dr. Christopher Emdin is also those things, best-selling author, brilliant, and he's at University of Southern California. And Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings is professor emeritus at University of Wisconsin-Madison, and of course, a best-selling author as well. Gloria, I got to go to you on this because you are the critical race theory and education expert. I don't understand. Like 5 years ago, the only time I ever heard critical race theory was when I was teaching it or I was in school. Now, I mean, like grad school with like 5 other nerds like me. Now, I can't go anywhere without hearing people talk about critical race theory and how much they hate it, even if they don't know what it is.
I'm glad you said that, Mark, because, I look at my own history with critical race theory. I began reading in critical race theory in 1988, 89. And I remember someone saying to me in the last couple of years, oh, you guys are trying to start a revolution. And I said, if it's a revolution, it's the slowest one I've been a part of. Because I've been doing this work over, 30 years. And I actually, when I get into a serious conversation with someone about critical race theory, I always move away from sort of trying to define it and talk to them about, tell me how you explain racial inequality. Now, if their statement is there is none, then we're living in parallel universes. We just don't see the world and there's nothing more to be said. But if they say, well, yeah, there's inequalities in education and in housing and in health, and if they acknowledge the inequalities, then I need to know their explanation. When I share with graduate students, I point out the United States has always had an explanation for inequality. From 1619 to the mid-20th century, the explanation was biogenetic. Those people just not smart enough. Somewhere around the mid-20th century, we get the Brown decision, and now what we say is, well, they don't have equal opportunity. That's not a bad explanation, but the problem with that is every time there's an attempt at equal opportunity, it gets rolled back. Brown, our kids are more segregated than ever. The Voters' Rights Act, you saw what happened to that. The Civil Rights Act, and we're waiting on this court with affirmative action. So using opportunity is not a good rubric for explaining it because it doesn't hold. I point out to people all the time, critical race theory is not my religion. It's my understanding of racial inequality. If I get a better explanation, guess what? I'll move to that. But right now, it's what I got.
So it's interesting because what Gloria Ladson-Billings just did was offer a brilliant analysis of critical race theory, how it can be used, how it should be used. But her explanation seems to be very different than what people are raving about on Fox News and what people are mad about on right-wing podcasts and what people are running into school board meetings to say they don't want their kids to learn, Chris Emdin. I'm hearing them say that they don't want their kids learning about racism. They don't want their kids reading school books that have black people in them. They don't want people hearing that they're oppressors or that they have privilege. Again, going back to the Woke Act. It seems to me that in some ways, they're taking everything that has anything to do with race, any race talk, any race conversation, any race representation, and they're calling it all critical race theory. And then they're making critical race theory the boogeyman, not the analysis of inequality that Gloria just gave us, which is what it's rooted in. But they're just saying it's this racial boogeyman that makes white people feel bad.
So here's the thing, Mark. Intentional ambiguity is a strategy for manipulators. Whether you're talking about a political manipulator or you're talking about an abuser, intentional ambiguity is a strategy. So for example, I say, those folks over there are bad and they will hurt you. Who? Them. You mean the one with the blue hat? Yup, him. Right? So by being intentionally ambiguous, it allows you to define who your opposition is, and then it becomes a catch-all to utilize your emotion as a reason why folks can support you. And I think we all have to understand that fact, that if there's something that's being pushed forth politically, ideologically, social politically, or otherwise, and somebody names it something, but they can't define it for you, but they get your emotions all riled up until you respond and say what you think it is, then they say that's what it is. That is a strategy to ensure that you're manipulated. And I think that we don't have enough conversations about the strategy around CRT or the strategy around the abuse of powerful theories like culturally relevant teaching, which we're going to get into that another time. But the reasons why folks are all riled up is because they're playing on your emotions, beloved. And when you don't recognize that you're being toyed with, you look at your emotion as a justification. And because I feel something. Just because you feel something don't mean it's right. Just because you feel something just means that it's a reason for somebody to be able to manipulate your emotion. And that's the political strategy of DeSantis. It was the same one for Trump. And, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds here, but it also has been a political strategy for even contemporary Democrats that will tell us that.
Absolutely. I want to bring up a quote from Christopher Rufo, who's been one of the champion opponents of critical race theory and in education. He's made the moral panic around this. I'm going to read this to you. He said, "We have successfully frozen their brand, critical race theory, into the public conversation and are steadily driving up negative perceptions. We will eventually turn it toxic as we put all of the various cultural insanities under that brand category. The goal is to have the public read something crazy in the newspaper and immediately think critical race theory. We have decodified the term and will recodify it to annex the entire range of cultural constructions that are unpopular with America." Bettina, it's like watching a cartoon where like the evil villain tells you his whole plan as he twiddles his thumbs and twirls his mustache. He laid out what he was going to do and they've done it. How is it that we can, he says, look, I'm going to make everything critical race theory, scare the heck out of white people, make them think everything bad is critical race theory, play on all their fears, and then tell them critical race theory is out to get their kids. Right? Then they did it. And people are reacting. How does this work?
At a certain point, you are amazed by it. But we have to remember, he is not any different than what we would say Lee Atwater did. Lee Atwater told us that you can't say the N-word anymore. You can't say the N-word anymore. So we're going to say integration. We're going to say busing, right? They know exactly the buzzwords to get the people going. They know exactly the buzzwords for white resentment, and they are using those words to be divisive. They know exactly what they're doing. And as Chris and as Gloria is saying, if we just take some just raw numbers, right? Let's say critical race theory is proliferated in our schools, and let's say it's everywhere. Well, who's doing it? 80% of teachers are white women. So who's doing the critical race theory? 2% of teachers are black men. Less than 2%. Less than 8% of black teachers are black women. So if critical race theory is everywhere, I would want to know who is doing it when 80% of teachers are white and white women. So if it is everywhere, white folks are doing it. It doesn't make any sense, but it's not about making sense. It is about making people angry and mad and playing on their fears. For political points and for a political grab of power. This has nothing to do with education. This has nothing to do with democracy. This has everything with making black people feel small. And when you hear black boy joy, when you hear black genius, when you hear all this blackness and all this beautifulness, it stokes white resentment, and they are using it for political power, not to make this country better, not to make this country more loving, not to make this country more kind, not to make this country more democratic. They're using it divisive, and Black people always are their punching bags.
Welcome back to the Griot and our special hour on education and the Black community. Gloria Ladson-Billings, there are people who continue, like you and the other panelists, who say, education has some fundamental issues we need to think through and work through. There's some issues around race and inequality that we need to wrestle with. If I'm a parent out there, or I'm a citizen who just wants to know about education, how it affects Black folk, what should I be reading? What should I be watching? What should I be doing?
So, Mark, one of the things I like to have people do is read in tandem. Because one of the things that happens, we read one book, and so that book becomes it. I would say read Carter G. Woodson, The Miseducation of the Negro, which is a very old book, 1934, but read it in tandem with Jarvis Gibbons' Fugitive Pedagogy. Or read Septima Clark's Ready from Within, which is about her struggle in South Carolina, but read it in tandem with Paulo Freire. She's literally talking about consensitization before he gave us a word for it. So have people read things in tandem.
I like that. Now, I'm also going to tell everybody to read y'all books. See, these three people out here got amazing books that we need to read too. Bettina Love has a book called We Want to Do More Than Survive. I'm telling you, it is a game changer. Chris Emdin has a book called For White Folks Who Teach in the Hood. And of course, Gloria Ladson-Billings has the classic Dream Keepers. All of those are books you should read. They got a whole lot more work than that, but those are just three books that I'm telling y'all. They too humble to say that. I'm telling y'all need to read to understand what's going on with Black education, how to educate Black children, how to train Black teachers, how to get different outcomes. Because if you put the same thing in, you're going to get the same thing out. So we're going to put something different into our minds and into our classrooms so that we can yield the kind of outcomes we want for our beautiful Black babies. Is that all right with y'all? Welcome back to the Griot and our special discussion on the war on Black education. Now, look, it's one thing to ban critical race theory. It's crazy. Y'all don't know what it is, but we're fine, right? It's one thing to ban an individual African-American studies class. It's egregious. It's disgusting, but we can probably win that. But all around the country, they're also banning books. They're banning actual books. And I'm not talking about like The Art of the Deal, Donald Trump's book. That probably should be banned. I could even see getting rid of Gifted Hands. Ben's earned it by now. Good book, but you earn our disregard, Ben. But no, we're talking about classics. Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye, Beloved, or books like Brenda Keeley's All-American Boys, or Angie Thomas's The Hate You Give, one of the classic young adult texts of the recent era. The great Alice Walker's The Color Purple, Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God, and of course, the mother of all banned books in the 21st century, Nicole Hannah-Jones's 1619 Project. They're banning all of it for a whole lot of reasons. Let me bring in the panel to help me make sense of this, because I'm baffled by this, Christopher Emdin. They are banning books on race. They're banning books that have a queer character. They're banning books that they're calling pornographic. I think The Color Purple they probably call pornographic. Same thing with The Bluest Eye. I mean, they are taking all of our treasured texts and finding a reason to say that they shouldn't be in K-12 classrooms. What do you make of this?
My response is really simple. We have to develop a strategy that is almost akin to the ways that they have been able to sort of play these ideas in our minds and say that we shouldn't be doing things, and utilize that to be able to make arguments for the books that these are the books that we should be reading. You got to, to me, if you ban a book, it's a sexier book to me, right? There's got to be a reason why you're banning it. And I think at this point, we have to take the argument out of, the schools ban the books. Man, we should work on that. I think there's a space for that conversation. I think there's another conversation that we need to have with parents and with communities that are saying, if they ban those books, then they should be in every barbershop. They should be in every beauty salon. They should be in your at home. And so you have to create a counter strategy. And because if you keep fighting with folks about whether or not you should allow our books in your school, then that argument becomes a move. We spend so much time arguing, we ain't buying the books. We're not introducing our young people to the books. We're not engaging in conversation with them about the books. So,
But Chris, let me ask you a question about that. Do we want to yield the school ground and the school curriculum to those folk, though? Because I get it. Like, we put it in the bookstore, we put it in the barbershop, all of that stuff. But then what happens now when the curriculum ain't got no Black folk in it?
Bro, the curriculum ain't been had no Black folks in it. Look, I hate to say it in this way, I hate to say it in this way, but the curriculum as it currently exists, in the absence, those books that you mentioned have not been a part of the text in schools to begin with. They're rarely there in the library to be. You banning something you ain't let in, and we mad. So the existing curriculum does not have black. You pick up any physics. I'm a STEM educator. Any physics, math, chemistry book, you don't see black faces. You don't hear about black inventions. You don't hear about ancestry and authenticity. And those are the things that are at the core and root of STEM. So my argument is simple. It doesn't exist to begin with. I'm not going to argue with you about something that don't exist. I'm going to create a counter strategy and or have a whole other Occupy Schools movement where we're really deliberate and intentional about reimagining the entire curriculum. Like, even if you ban those books, there are other books I can use and put in. And then we just be playing all day long. I'm gonna give you some new books. You're gonna ban those. We're gonna bring them home and then bring some new ones. I mean, if you want to play that game, we can play that game.
Bettina, what do you make of it?
Yeah, I want to make 2 points about curriculum. Number one, when you don't teach about Black people in the classroom, you are still teaching about Black people in the classroom. So I want to be very clear about that. Just because you ban these books and now Black folks are not in the classroom, you are telling students about who belongs in the classroom. Curriculum is a powerful, powerful tool. We can't just see it as book bans. It's about belonging. What we see in the classroom and what we put in the classroom, when you are a teacher, and we all used to be teachers on this Zoom right now, we all were teachers. Your billboards, your bulletin boards, everything you plaster in that classroom, it tells students who belongs here, who's made contributions, who's beautiful, whose history counts, whose ancestors count. And so when you remove curriculum that is rich and diverse and that's beautiful, you are making a statement about who belongs in this country and who does not belong in this country.
What's the impact of that? For example, there was an author in Newark whose book was banned. The brother was writing about being a queer Black man. Mm-hmm. And if we take those books with queer characters out of first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, what does that mean for now? They would say, well, maybe we'll stop people from being queer. I mean, sadly, that's what the right is arguing, almost that we're creating homosexuality, we're creating perverse behaviors, we're creating all this stuff through the representation in the book. But if we take that kind of disgusting, disturbing, homophobic bigotry out for me, because I don't even want to take that argument seriously, what do we lose when we lose those books?
Well, I want to say representation is powerful. When you see yourself, it is a powerful thing to see yourself. And we got to be very clear that queer folks and Black folks and folks of color, we only make up 2 to 3% of children's books. We know how low the statistic already is. So when you take us out, where else you going to find us? But I think when you are a person of multiple identities, right? And you're talking about being Black and being queer and being Muslim and being trans, all of these beautiful identities, when you take us out of the classroom, those students who are looking for themselves and searching for themselves, now the only time they're going to see themselves in the classroom is as a slave. And that is what they are doing. They are making sure that we are in our place through the curriculum. The curriculum is the hand of white supremacy. It is the hand of white supremacy. So when you walk into a hand of white supremacy, it is the hand, because it will tell you who belongs. It will tell you who is powerful. It will tell you who is deserving. And that is what curriculum does in schools every single day. And so when Black folks and queer folks and brown folks are not there, it is telling you that we are not deserving and we don't belong.
Gloria, one of the fascinating things to me, and I just got back from South Carolina where I was at a school board meeting where critical race theory was at the top of the list. A whole bunch of books were banned in this particular town I was in. Is that many of the people in South Carolina, Florida, and other places who are expressing outrage, many of the parents who just don't want their kids to read this stuff, they're not actually parents of the kids in the schools. Right. Groups like Moms for Liberty, they act as if their kids are in the school, and they're not. So what's at play here? If it's not actual parents who are outraged that their son is reading The Bluest Eye, because I can't imagine this white woman in Pennsatucky actually knows the Bluest Eye enough to be outraged by it. So what's actually driving these movements to ban books in schools?
So I think we could all say we've seen this movie before. At the end of Reconstruction, the strategy through the Daughters of the Confederacy was to promulgate and champion the lost cause. And that's why the curriculum reads the way it does now. So this is this never-ending fight to suggest and to argue we're white and we're supreme. I mean, that's at the root of all of this, and it shifts and it morphs over time, but it keeps coming back. It is a multi-headed snake. So you can chop it down on this side, it shows up in another way. Think about the notion of book banning. Which societies in this world have done this? And that's who we want to emulate? Because we certainly saw it in the rise of Nazism, right? So think about who we are emulating when we say we are going to, quote, ban books. Last thing I want to say is that the people who are at the root of all of this don't know anything about adolescent development. Because how do you get a teenager to do something? You tell them they can't do it.
And it's fascinating to me that the very people, the Republicans, the conservatives, the right-wingers, who keep saying liberty, right? Liberty is their go-to word when it's about not wearing a mask and having the right to infect half the world. You know, they use free speech as an example of their liberty. They say they hate cancel culture when they're held accountable for being bigoted. And yet at the same time that they say, I have a right to say what I want, when I want, however I want, they want to ban books from the curriculum which challenge the status quo, which introduce new ideas, which present new representations of the world. It's like y'all don't even believe the stuff y'all say y'all believe. You say you want free speech, but you're banning books. Welcome back to The Grill. I'm Marc Lamont Hill. We've been talking all night about education and the Black community and what the efforts to stop Black books, Black curriculum, Black history in schools means. How do we make sense of it? How do we break down, the legal and political motivations behind all of it? But right now I want to do something else. I want to talk about some solutions. Chris in the last block started to talk about some things, right? They take the books out of the curriculum. They take the books out of our schools. We should have them someplace else. I want to keep moving in that vein, not just political strategies, but also teaching strategies. Like, what do we do, Bettina Love, at a moment where our books are under assault, where ideas are under assault, where history is under assault? What can we do as parents, as students, or as teachers?
Well, I think the main thing is to organize. We're going up against forces that are highly organized, and we are trying to piecemeal and put things together. We need to get as organized as they are. We need to have our messaging as clear as they are. And I really think we need to hold schools of education more accountable. Schools of education are where teachers learn critical race theory, and schools of education have not said a word about this. We need these individuals that train teachers in racism and white supremacy and diversity and equity and inclusion. That is where we train these teachers, and schools of education need to step up and back communities, back teachers, and fight off these individuals and these actual organizations who are attacking everyday working teachers. Everyday working teachers are being attacked. And so we need to have more funds for them. We need to have more support for them. And we need to have more protection, because I am getting calls daily about teachers being threatened, teachers being actually physically assaulted by these very individuals that you are seeing screaming at board meetings. Teachers need protection right now, and they need support. They are coming out of a global pandemic right into another fire, and they haven't had any protection, any rest, and any reassurance that when they teach in this way that their jobs are going to be secure. So we need more political power. We need schools of education to step up. We need politicians to step up. We need funders to step up and let these teachers know that if you're going to use these tactics to teach, if you're going to use Black history and Black joy and Black creativity to teach, that you are going to be protected. And right now, there's nobody standing up for teachers.
Well, since you talked about the teachers, Chris, I want to ask you about the students. What should we be doing for students who need to learn? They need access to these books. They need access to these ideas. If we want to produce another generation of freedom fighters and thinkers and just good people, we got to make sure they get the right curriculum, and the curriculum's under assault. So what should we be doing to make sure students are okay?
I'm a firm believer in the power of institutions to teach students. I also recognize their limitations. And I also understand that for Black folks, formal structures of education have never been our primary mechanism for distributing information, ideas to our babies. I send my babies to school knowing that in school they'll learn some things. But what they learn more is how to navigate what I've implanted into their psyche about their beauty and their magic in a world or a system that may not see that. So you go there every day to find out how to navigate things. This is how them folks act. This is how these folks act. This is how you share your ideas. And so school's purpose for me is not about the content per se. It's about my children being able to know how to navigate a world that may not necessarily be designed for them. And then we have to understand that education exists everywhere. I said the barbershop before. I said the beauty salon before. I said we're OGs engaging in conversations with young folks. I think that Malcolm X said it best, and I'm paraphrasing here. If you expect your enemy to educate your child, you are a fool. And we have to understand that. So while we address the issues in schools, we have to have a more robust approach to engaging with young folks that are outside of schools. We do hip hop ed every Tuesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern for the last 12 years. Conversations with OGs, professors, and students about their education. And those are informal digital spaces that we can construct that can serve as a piece of the constellation of experiences that young folks get that help them to be able to reach their full potential. So that's one thing. And then the other thing I would say, for young folks is like, we collectively have to step up. The expectation is that, either a school, a university, an after school program has the full responsibility. And everybody who's listening to us right now, everybody is a youth-facing person. Teachers are not those who are credentialed. I revere teachers. I am a teacher. And their job is tough. But everybody has a role to teach. What's a young person in your community that you're sharing the clip of this conversation with? The OG shared some books. How are you reading that book and passing it on to a youngin'? And so we've got to get to the place where we don't rely on the system alone to educate our children, and that we are more creative and more connected to the way we've always taught. And,
I like that. I like that.
How we connect. You know what I mean?
Gloria, I'll give you the last word on this. What do we do about this race question? America has some maturing to do around race and understanding about race and racism and whiteness and power and oppression, all these things, at the same time that they're committed to erasing all the conversation about it. So what do we do to develop an education system and really just a country that takes issues of race seriously?
So I think Bettina and Chris have given us a kind of both and. This is what we do with the institution. This is what we do beyond the institution. And I don't think we make a choice. I think every liberation movement that Black people have been engaged in has had both subversiveness and a front-facing, here's what we're trying to do. This is the legislation. So we need to keep doing both of these things. But I think it's really, really important for us to understand the situation we find ourselves in. I mean, we are literally in a war to remain alive. And I know that sounds so hyperbolic, but about 10 years ago when I said there was a war on public education, everybody said I was hyperbolic. Now they're telling me, oh, wow, you was right about that. No, indeed, just to exist is one of the things that we are, if you say, quote, Black Lives Matters, people gonna get upset just about the phrase?
Yeah.
What is that saying to you? So I think we do have to continue on this more subversive strategy while, declaring we have a right to be here. I'm actually finishing up a manuscript. I sent the book off right before Christmas on justice, because I want you to argue with me about that. Okay. I don't want, Christopher Rufo, tell me what is justice, the CRT thing? Because it literally exists in your Constitution. So I'm really trying to push us forward on this notion of what does justice look like? And,
what does justice look like? That's the question. That's the question right there. And certainly part of justice has to be an equitable education system. And it seems that at every turn, our open enemies are stopping us from achieving that goal. So we're going to keep fighting. We're going to keep building. Right now, we're going to take a quick break. All right, welcome back to The Griot and our special episode on education and the Black community. I got one last question from my panel, and it's a grim one in a way, or maybe it's a hopeful one. I don't know. I just keep thinking there's such an organized fight against our history, against our knowledge, against our representation of self. We got to fight back. If we don't fight back, if we don't win, what does the future look like? Gloria?
I'm less sanguine about the notion of winning. The question is, what does the next struggle look like? That's essentially what we are here for. Harriet Tubman said it. We're not here to win. We're here to struggle.
Bettina?
I think we have to realize that this is not just about Black students, it's about all students. When individuals in this country don't learn about Black people, everybody loses out. It's not just that we don't know our history. This country doesn't know our history. And so this country loses out on the ideas of democracy, on the ideas of justice, on the ideas of inclusion. And so I really want to make it known that it's not just about Black folks, it's about this country becoming a country about love and justice. And so if we lose this fight, America loses this fight. It's not just us, they lose too.
Chris?
That's brilliant, man. I mean, the question is, if we don't fight, what happens? And I'll respond with a question, right? Because we will fight, what will happen? I can't rest on the notion that we won't. We are right now, and we'll continue to.
That's the hope, that's the struggle, that's the beauty, that's the joy that makes Black people extraordinary, that makes us the stewards of American democracy, and what makes this righteous struggle for educating our children one that we have to continue to fight, and one that we will be successful. Because the victory, as Gloria reminds us, is in the struggle. All right, family, we have reached the end of the show, but before I let you go, I just want to reiterate a point that's been made tonight, and that is that we have to be responsible for educating our own children. There is no community, there is no race, there is no nation, there is no entity that is successful that allows its open enemies to educate them. Your oppressors, your enslavers will never give you the tools to be free. The only way we get free is if we educate ourselves. Now, public education is ours. We are citizens of this country. We are invested in it. We pay taxes. We built this country. We deserve to have high quality education in our schools. And I will go to the grave fighting for it. All of us should do that. At the same time, we have to commit to making sure our kids get what they need, both inside of school and outside of school. Somebody told me, never let schooling get in the way of your education. What did they mean? They meant go to school, get your degrees, get your paper, no doubt. But don't ever think that that's the total story of who you are or who we are. That means we got to support Black bookstores. It means we got to support community education. It means we got to form study groups. It means we got to commit to educating each other to correct the lies and the damage that's been done by school.